Just wanting to let everybody know first, obviously the weather is certainly questionable this week and has been already. Our emergency management team is keeping an eye on the storm system, of course, and thanks to Chief Craner at PFD, who's leading that effort for the city, and our colleagues at the county EOC. So wherever this system makes landfall, that it is a storm season that has officially begun. So make sure you're prepared and you look at your preparedness plans and keep an eye on the forecast. So we have our eyes on it, and certainly our citizens can rest assured we will keep them informed if anything develops. At this point, looking like a pretty sizable rain event, but knock on wood, nothing overly bigger than that, I guess, at this point. We're excited that we're on the agenda for the Triumph Gulf Coast Board meeting on Monday in Panama City, and certainly grateful to bring this project, the Birdon project, to them. The Triumph Board will review the term sheet for the grant agreement to the city, as well as performance requirements by Birdon, and it's step 2 of the 3-step process for the Triumph Grant Award. If everything goes well there, the next major milestone is an approval of the grant agreement, which we hope to bring to the Triumph Board later this summer. After that would be the lease terms between the city and Birdon, both of which would require city council approval and confirmation that the EDA and FLJGF will, that's the Job Growth Grant Fund from the Governor's Job Growth Grant Fund, grants would be awarded. In the interim, Birdon is completing a noise study on their intended facility design. I've shared with you guys previously. That was a non-starter from our office that we, to keep the harmony between a vibrant port economy and a vibrant downtown economy, that was something that was extremely important to us, and Birdon has previous experience in at least one of their other locations in the Northeast of having to kind of marry those two things. So it's not unfamiliar to them. They were certainly more than willing to take that on. So that certainly gives me assurance and the city council and the public that the manufacturing activities happening on port won't be an issue. We're also continuing our efforts to identify parking and commuting options to support the influx of personnel at the port when Birdon starts ramping up towards the 2,000 total jobs. Not all 2,000, as a reminder, will be out on port, but certainly will be a huge win for the city and for the region overall to be talking about at full steam $160 million of payroll being injected annually into our region and local economy. This is Birdon's 5th manufacturing facility and 6th overall location in the U.S. with Pensacola operations. The total project cost estimate remains at $275 million and $130 million in site prep and construction of 2 advanced manufacturing facilities at the port, totaling 380,000 square feet, and $145 million of equipment to outfit the facilities. Contributions to the project are expected from Triumph, the $76 million that has been discussed, the Florida Job Growth Grant Fund at $14 million, the U.S. Department of Commerce at the EDA grant at $33 million, and Birdon with investing $152 million. We're also pursuing other grant opportunities to support workforce development with UWF, PSC, and Birdon. And I would just add that I certainly look, if our citizens would bless me with a second term, I think a large theme of that second term is going to be we've gotten these big wins with ST Engineering with a 3rd and 4th hangar. We've gotten the largest employer potentially in our city with Birdon. We will be, our #1 priority in economic development moving forward will be to make sure that Pensacolians are getting those jobs. I think that it will not be necessarily focus on attracting another 1,500 or 2,000 job employer. That would be great. We certainly would not turn those away. But I think half the battle is attracting them. The other half of the battle is making sure that our kids and our grandkids, our high school graduates, are getting these opportunities. So I've already started conversations at the state level. Actually had some during the U.S. Conference of Mayors with the Department of Labor. They do have some grant opportunities and some funding opportunities to help bolster the workforce in regions all over the country. So that'll be a hyper focus for us, and that's something we're going to actually start this summer. We're putting together a kind of statewide, local, and with some national presence, kind of a workforce development summit here in Pensacola, where we'll try to bring all of those parties together to say, how can we ensure that we are best prepared to fill all of these amazing opportunities that are presented to us here in the city. So more to come on that. Fricker groundbreaking was rescheduled. Obviously, it was going to be this morning. Thanks for being flexible with your schedules here. We were moving it to June 26th at 9:30 in the morning at the center. So there was no place to do it inside, so we didn't want to roll the dice and get all of y'all's fancy technology and equipment wet this morning. Save the date for the Alice S. Williams right across the street. The ribbon cutting there is July 20th for the Alice S. Williams Child Care Center. Community Action will provide child care services for children ages birth to 2. And it was funded in part by a $500,000 African American Culture and Historical grant from the state of Florida to help repair and restore the building while preserving many of its historical elements as possible. And then an additional $550,000 came from the West Side CRA. And certainly a part of our child care initiative that we've discussed many, many times, and that's focused on expanding access to child care and working families in the city. So very excited to have that. That, again, will be July 20th, will be that ribbon cutting. Legacy Campus update. Certainly pleased that the CRA has approved the RFP that Councilman Wiggins has brought forward to guide development and to try to get that community conversation going once and for all. And that RFP that he's focused on is community engagement and development feasibility advisor. And certainly looking forward, as we have, and want to thank Cliff Collins in the back. He's kind of been our support for Delarian Wiggins in our office, anything that they've needed to try to get an RFP, get his RFP forward. A reminder that the demolition work floor by floor is beginning. Sequencing it that way certainly helps us control debris removal, reduce likelihood of large debris issues, and allow the team to monitor the site as work progresses. I know it was going to begin this week. We might have a little hiccup with weather, but generally still on schedule of what we've already shared with you or you have heard publicly. Reminder of Juneteenth closures. The city offices will be closed Friday, this coming Friday for the holiday. Sanitation schedule is changing. That means Thursday routes will be picked up today, and Friday routes will be picked up Thursday. And I do appreciate our sanitation department's efforts of increased proactive response, more texts going out, more text alerts going out to our customers. We've tried to up our game and making sure, because these are the hard ones. The Friday holidays are much harder to communicate and to get to 55,000 people than the Monday ones. The Monday is easy because it got delayed a day. You might have rolled it out to your curb. The Friday ones where you didn't roll it out soon enough are always the ones where we get naturally a few more phone calls. So we know we've got to be even more proactive in those scenarios. Osceola and Roger Scott will remain open. The Hunter Pool will operate on its holiday schedule. Session 1 open swim occurring from 10:30 to 3:30. Lastly, just want to give a shout out to Alex Gartner and the children's chorus folks. Were part of the youth choir series at Carnegie Hall in New York. So they performed this week, and certainly proud to have a great organization that has been doing such an amazing job for a long, long time, representing us on maybe the biggest stage you can possibly represent us on in that field. So congratulations to Alex and everybody involved. That is everything I've got, and happy to take any questions you have.
Mayor, have you communicated at all with Councilman Delarian Wiggins about why he pulled the CRA expansion discussion?
I haven't, but I'm my understanding from our side, from the administration, is obviously there's some lots of unknowns that have been thrown our way here in the last 60 and 90 days as it pertains to how the general government's going to operate moving forward as soon as November. I'm speculating a little bit. I don't want to speak for, to be clear, Jim, I don't want to speak for Councilman Wiggins. I have not spoken to him directly on why that item was pulled, but I think there's some fair logic to the idea that conversations that are in and around property tax right now as a whole. This is something we've been working on for a long, long time. So I think the timing of bringing it forward as proposed was just coincidental in the sense that this has been a long time coming for our CRA staff to get this in front. It's just kind of timed out in this kind of awkward time of, well, we don't know what the impacts or consequences of any of this is going to be now that that there's a much bigger conversation happening statewide. So, probably prudent that we hit a little bit of a pause button on that until we have a better understanding of every consequence and every pro and con for decisions like that.
So do you think that discussion's off the table until after November?
I wouldn't even go that far. I won't. Number one, let me ensure what if there's any outside of what I just speculated as I think pretty reasonable logic of why we would pause that. One, let me identify if that's not the case and if there's something outside of what I just said before I would go that far. And secondly, in concept, I don't know that it would necessarily change anything. I mean, the CRA update, I think, is long needed. There's lots of old maps and old things that maybe made sense when they were drawn don't make sense now. So none of that logic, I think, has changed. It's just more of what are the ramifications of completely upending how local governments are funded. And so, I think in any setting, whether it was about property tax, whether it was about any department in the city, if there was an impending significant change to how things are funded and operated, we probably wouldn't have a conversation in this proximity to it without having a better understanding. So is that a guarantee it won't come up until after a vote? No. Let us learn a little bit more about that. But it's going to put us back on our heels, I think, on any conversation that we're having. Frankly, it doesn't stop with CRA. Conversations about police, about fire, about union negotiations, about parks and rec, about equipment, I think it's fair to say that we're looking at things through a different lens right now than we were 90 days ago. Not because we didn't foresee that something was taking place, but we're certainly close enough now that we want to be making smart decisions on behalf of the taxpayer. Yes, sir.
Mayor, so Birdon, if all goes according to plan, will be fully operational 2029, perhaps. I think that's the production, then ramping up.
Correct, but there would be presence on the port fairly quickly.
Sooner rather than later.
Much sooner rather than later. Yeah.
But so you talked about noise.
Mm-hmm.
The impacts of an industrial facility like that go well beyond the workforce. For instance, Austell
mm-hmm.
over in Mobile, 30% of the people who come in there are subcontractors who have businesses inside the city of Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
So they are coming and going,
yep.
Doing their subcontractor work. That footprint, the traffic, the role subcontractors would play with Birdon, is there an impact, like an environmental impact program required for this? I mean, all of the things that look at the effects, as you mentioned, on noise of an industrial facility.
Yeah, I would hate to speak to, technically, I know there's so much paperwork and things that go into, what studies have to be done versus what's taken place. But what I would say is, as you're asking that question, I'm just thinking to myself, that's the recording we want for an inland port. I mean, that is exactly why we're talking about and why we want to be very aggressive with an inland port, is because the best apples to apples example of Austell that you just talked about here that I always use was GE, where there's 500 jobs at GE on Scenic Highway, but there's a 2,200 job impact to GE existing here. We certainly think that it will not end at 2,000 at full steam. There'll be 2,000 jobs plus other ancillary vendors, subcontractors, third parties that will be wanting to be in close proximity to Birdon. I don't know that those facilities would necessarily have to be on port, but that's why I think that is our sales pitch, and one that we've been using aggressively at both the state and the federal level, of why there's such a vital importance to take on an inland port, because we envision that an inland port that would have some of those same amenities that are valuable to manufacturers and businesses about the fence line and the rules and what you can and can't do and in what those zones. Exactly, all of those things can still take place even if it's not physically on the water. So I think that really allows us to grow into what that other secondary job growth potential would be following Birdon. So that is why we're trying to pursue that so aggressively, is because we see the same thing that you mentioned there. I think we would be short-sighted to say we're going to add Birdon and that's going to be 2,000 jobs and the conversation's going to end there, which is a great thing for the city if we manage it correctly.
Traffic, the traffic impacts.
Yeah. So again, our port has been able to handle and manage traffic. It has a traffic plan. Those are things that we're always going to look at and are part of our conversation. Parking, I mentioned, that we obviously have to work through that. And there's been a garage across the train tracks south of Phelps and the Holiday Inn that on that city-owned surface parking lot that's been surmised in CRA plans back 20 years. I think it was a CRA plan in like 2010 that drew. It's like, well, why don't you put a parking garage here? We probably didn't need one at the time, but I think it was around the same idea as you start to grow jobs and grow vibrancy in your downtown. So we're looking at all of those things. Those are things that our economic development office monitors. It's our port monitors, and we certainly feel confident that we're putting something on port that we'd be able to handle and manage.
But will the city have to do an environmental impact statement, or does the port already fold it in?
Let us follow up with you on that. I'd hate to say it's something we may have already done. What our environmental requirements are. All I can do is speak generally that every time there's federal dollars involved and state dollars involved, whether it's Baptist Hospital or it's the port, usually there is significant due diligence that takes place within the environmental scheme of things and everything like that. I couldn't speak to specific documents or anything like that, but we certainly have staff who can. So we'll follow up with you on that.
Councilman Bear mentioned he would maybe like to bring forward an ordinance to ban data centers in city limits. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll reiterate what I mentioned before. I mean, I'm certainly not in support of that at this time inside the city limits. And I think secondarily, what my bigger and probably more realistic concern, we're 22 square miles of landmass, I believe, in the city. I don't know that we're a ripe location already. So it's kind of, yeah, we can have that conversation, and I'm generally supportive of that. I don't think that the largest potential threat of data centers to the city of Pensacola is that a data center would be located inside the city limits. I think our largest threat would be us taking on potential negative environmental impacts downstream. Right. So if there were to be one in the county, in the region somewhere, that is what would be the biggest concern to me by far is, water flows this way, the rivers flow this way, and so what's happening in the rest of the county could have some. The power grid does not stop at the city limit line, right? So there's all of these infrastructure things that would have some ancillary impact on us. That's probably our more realistic in terms of just this city. That's the thing that we really need to be staying on top of and monitoring, and something that if there was a conversation about a moratorium or ban or anything else, at whether the city level, the county, that I would want to understand what kind of our legal position is and how can we defend our city to ensure that if something out of our control does take place, that our environment's protected and our citizens' environment's protected. That would be my number one concern, and probably slightly more realistic than the idea that a large data center would be going inside the city limits, given property constraints and everything else like that. So, but to summarize, yes, I mean that's certainly a conversation. That just with that one headline of it, I would generally be open to or supportive of, but devil's in the details. Many times we'd see what that looks like, and we wouldn't want it to have any other inadvertent impacts to other potential development and things like that. So we'd have to look at it in detail, but looking forward to the conversation if that comes up.
Mayor, yesterday at the TDC, the nonprofits were presenting their proposals for that tax. Rob Overton over at the UWF Historic Trust got an earful from Councilman Bear about the parking lot that UWF maintains, the Historic Trust maintains. Bear's words were, the city would really, that should really belong to the city, that parking lot. And I'm assuming I'm thinking of the one by their building over there. But he said, your using Premier is giving the city a bad name. And Overton says, well, we like to work with the city, but it just doesn't work for us. Premium generates a lot more revenue than we can get from the city. Has your team talked to Rob about this in the past? Are you familiar with his angst?
Yeah, well, two different conversations. Commandeering property. I don't know. I don't know if I have a comment on that one. I don't know who owns property and what we're allowed to do. You'd have to ask Councilman Bear about that. I don't know if he's. And they have a couple different parcels that he could be talking about. One over by Seville Square, one by Seville Quarter over there off Tarragona Street. So I know UWF operates a couple. To your second question, yes, generally speaking, as you've heard me say many times, the confusion intentionally created by private lots, not by UWF, but just in general by private lot operators, the intentional confusion is the bane of my existence. Yes, so I would agree with that. That many people who email me and say, I can't believe you charge $5 an hour, immediately informs me that they aren't parking on the city parking space. So I would agree with Councilman Bear on that front. And then lastly, we actually did explore a couple of years ago. We did explore the idea of could the city potentially have the ability to go to a private operator and say, hey, listen, we already have a department. Is it something that you don't have to boot cars? We can write tickets that go on license plate. Is that something that just philosophically we want to entertain? But as of right now, I believe unintended, when the recent state statutes that protected residents and cities' governments that required that sign that says this is not a government lot, it's not operated by the government and all that. Well, I think the unintended consequence of that legislation was it actually, in essence, outlawed a city from going to a private lot owner and saying, hey, is this something that we could operate on private property? So at that point, it's kind of we've just left it. So if you're asking me philosophically, would it make more sense? Would it eliminate confusion? And if nothing else, instead of sending a private lot owner sending half their money to New Orleans or to wherever, that money be doing what we're arguing, which is at least if you're paying it, that it be reinvested back in your city, not into the coffers of somewhere else in another state. Then sure, I think, but that's not something we're actively pursuing at this point. I think, we got enough to do to get this rollout back going and Palafox Street and the ancillary roads done. So I'd have to know what lots they're talking about. But I would say all in all, our relationship with the trust is. It's pretty good, and listen, with every vendor we have, there's coulda, woulda, shouldas. I wish we could do it this way, whether it's the county, whether it's UWF. And probably going both ways, right? So, I don't have any lingering issues with how the Historic Trust is operating or anything right now, and I'd have to get into more details specifically with Councilman Bear on what he's talking about. Anything else?
Mayor,
Yeah.
at the city council meeting on Monday, I think it was Amy Toole informed the council that the FDOT was not moving forward with two-waying MLK and Davis Highway. Do you know, I guess, why did that not work out?
Yeah, so we got notified by FDOT relatively recently that it's just not realistic to take place in the time frame that it would allow. Clearly, I am a supporter of that idea. We went and scrambled together $400,000 and a thank you to Commissioner May, who found a couple $100,000 as well for this project within their district. But I think the realities of their priority list of what's most important to them. I think a good way to frame it is their priority, is it a higher priority to do MLK and Davis or Sorrento Road, for example? Now, Sorrento if I'm just selfish to the city, I'd say, well, MLK and Davis because it's in the city. But in reality, I grew up in Perdido Key, and I would probably think that Sorrento Road, I've driven that road, feels like 1 million times, and I've seen how many wrecks and how many crosses are on the side of that since I was 3, growing up driving in every day. So at the end of the day, yes, it's an FDOT decision. We certainly advocated for it. As you know, this conversation's been taking place for years, at least with Mayor Robinson, and I don't even remember how much further previous to that. So it is not something that we are volunteering that we don't want to do, but the financial realities were going to be, we would have to find the $6 million to do it, and we would have to take the maintenance of the road. So when you want to talk about how things have changed in the last 90 days, how responsible would it have been? One, we don't have the $6 million. I mean, frankly, there would be nowhere to find that. And two, our taxpayers in the city taking the maintenance of a state road that's currently a state road is just not feasible. So that it isn't because they haven't been communicative. I just think that dynamics have changed and priorities have shifted within FDOT. And in defense of FDOT, we work with them every single day, whether it's a street light, a bridge. And so I don't want this to be looked at as an isolated issue like FDOT isn't supportive of the city. They're supportive of us in many, many projects and helpful to us in many projects. This is just one where, it didn't go in our way, and that's okay. And so unfortunate, of course, but we'll move on to all the dozens of other things that we're working on with them, like the Sun Trail that we talked about yesterday. That's an FDOT project as well. So. Unfortunate, yes, we wanted to see that happen, but that's just the reality where we are.
Was it the ARPA dollars, the time constraints from that?
No, I think this is not, I'm not speaking for FDOT, this is my opinion. My opinion is the $600,000 was an increase in the delta of design to go from a one-way design, the existing one-way redesign, to a two-way design. So step one to get to the next lily pad was going to be find $600,000 to even design it that way. So we did that. But before, and again, out of respect, I mean, certainly I respect FDOT in this sense. So before we go expend, the worst case scenario would have been go spend that $600,000, design it two-way, spend a year of time, and then say, here's your bill for $6 or $7 million to do it that we don't have. And then now, not only did we not get the two-way, we didn't even get the one-way. We get redesigned and repaved and modernized either. So, that's where it related is basically like, look, before you go spend the $600,000, this is FDOT saying, hey, we're watching the horizon here, and this isn't going to look like it's going to fit within the time frame of design, and then whatever year that would be coming back to construction. It's number 10 on the TPO list. And that sounds high. If you look at how many projects get done each year, it's really not that high. I mean, that does not time out within the pocket of time that you'd want a design to be finished and construction to begin. So again, I think that's really where it was more of the looming construction project and how that was going to time out than it was. But being as fiscally responsible in delivering bad news to say, before we go burn through $600,000 on something that isn't going to probably happen, let's just have real talk right now. And so again, not the answer we wanted, but I certainly respect FDOT for having a more fiscally responsible conversation now versus kicking this thing down the road and then everybody ending up disappointed.
So is FDOT moving forward with a rebuild of that road?
That's how the initial conversation started, and my understanding would be that the number 10 item on the priority list would still be is the mill and I'd have to get the exact details, mill and resurface and what the other amenities are going to be. But the fork in the road was bring it back as a one-way, bring it back as a two-way. And because there is significant expense that goes into two-waying a street. You don't think about it, you're like, well, hey, there's 2 lanes here already. But when you think about stop signs and lights and intersections and all of those things, one of the major costs of it would actually have been the roundabout at the north end up by the Fairfield exit of I-110. Remember that road, when you go south, forks right there. So a significant cost to two-waying it versus leaving it the way it was actually wasn't in asphalt and striping. It was just this major north terminus, basically, of the project that was going to be significant. And so that's where the delta of cost is two-waying a street is whatever you think as a citizen it would cost you to go from one way to two-way of a street like that. It's like triple that. I mean, it's just very, very complicated to do. So again, I'm certainly confident that our team ushered it along and went and hustled to get that extra funding. And again, Commissioner May did that as well to see if we could make that happen. But we're facing the reality that it's just not going to happen. So we'll go fight for our next and advocate for our next project and go from there.
Was there any, two questions. Was there any discussion with like the east side neighborhood about giving up on that? And then has there been any idea of how that would affect the Hollis T. Williams project of increasing walkability in that area?
So, I mean, we didn't hold any formal workshop or anything because, one, it's not our project, and two, I mean, again, it's ultimately an FDOT decision. It's not, last thing I'd want to do is go meet with a neighborhood association and try to, promise or say we're going to do something that isn't within our control. And clearly, seeing the end result, that's why. But I will say, actually, the conversation that when this has come up in previous years, I know before this administration and early when we've had just town halls up there, there's actually some kind of mixed feelings about it, I think, and that could be lack of understanding of traffic safety and slowing cars, and I could get into a whole nerd out diatribe on street design and how that slows down cars and all that. And if this was moving forward, we certainly would have been having those conversations, that if we felt like there was some light at the end of the tunnel. But here's, I guess what I would tell you is anecdotally, through the years of just conversation about that coming up, it was not a consensus item within the neighborhood. I would never say that it was. I would have an opinion that it would be very valuable, but that doesn't mean everybody else had that opinion. That ends up being a moot point because of what I've already described to you previously. I don't want to make it sound like that's why it didn't get done, but I think that's probably something FDOT was considering as well, is that unlike a Sorrento Road, I would think Sorrento Road's pretty unanimous. I don't think anybody's like keep it 2 lanes and make sure there's nowhere to be able to pull off on the side of the road, using my other example. I think there's probably a lot more consensus on some other projects that FDOT is working on in the area than there was necessarily about MLK and Davis. I was an advocate of it and a proponent of slowing cars down there, but not everybody in the neighborhood felt that way, would be my assessment.
Mayor, talk for a second about budget markup as you move toward the 2027 budget process. First, when do you expect to bring a pro forma to council? Usually that's in June or July. And second, I'm sure your CFO has prepared contingency pro formas. Take us behind the curtain on that one and tell us, what are you seeing behind the curtain that you're prepared to talk about?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's 2 parts of this conversation. One is the obvious newsworthy one of what the impact of property tax and what that looks like. I was hoping you were going to tell me how the trust fund was going to work in Tallahassee that they were talking about.
They're talking about it at the county right now as we speak.
So, yes. So I would say at the first level, we are preparing. We're doing the same evaluations that the county is doing about what those impacts would be, what that looks like in year 1, what that looks like in year 2. But we also, to your point, we've got budget conversation to have like today right in front of us that's going to move a little. That certainly needs to be adopted before this vote takes place. So we're having to kind of look at both of these things concurrently. Let's take the property tax conversation off for a second. Just in a conventional setting, some of the things we predicted and some of the things we've speculated, like sales tax growth, like property tax growth, were not wildly different than we expected. Some slowing of those things, right? So that's. And I think I told you probably around a year ago or 10 months ago, our conversation we expected our conversation with our departments to be 1 in, 1 out. And I think that's probably happening pretty literally. I think we've ultimately at this point gone to our departments and said, if your budget's $100, last year, your budget's $100 this year, kind of thing, to oversimplify it. But so we're already bracing for the flattening trajectory of those numbers, regardless of the property tax conversation. So as you can
Does that
imagine,
include pay levels?
potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah. Like COLAs, you're talking about cost of living increases. Yes. I mean, there's not been a decision made on that, but that has to be part of this conversation right now. And so, but yeah, nothing finalized. Anything else? All right, guys. Thanks so much.